please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have Jackie Scott here and Stephen Sorensen now is Dean's appointee. And so let's.
Can I say a couple words?
We never did that before, but go ahead.
No, I just want to say it's a pleasure to serve with all of you. When I look at the history of all the boards I've served on throughout the city for the last 40 years, it's so much fun to get on a new board and obviously a board of this significance. And my objective is to work with everyone here and do the best job we can to evaluate the charter, see if any changes need to be made and make a recommendation. So
Well,
thank you very much.
hopefully you met with the city staff and got yourself up to speed as to where we are.
Well, I've been coming to every meeting, so I think I'm okay.
Well, do a lot in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Going back on that, if you want to take a roll call
Thank you. Judith Stern,
here.
Harrison Brand Williams,
Here.
Jacqueline Scott,
Present.
Christopher Furtick,
Here.
and Richard Weiss. Thank you.
All right, the approval of the September 7th and October 5th meeting. I had sent some comments back. Did anyone verify that from the September 7th?
You said comments to
Uh,
the liaison, right?
Yeah.
I'll check with it and see if she did anything after the fact. I haven't heard anything, but I'll check on it.
Okay.
Did you want to make amendments to the minutes?
Well, it was just the same thing I asked for at the last meeting to defer the September meeting. So if there's no comments back. It talked about me talking about the primary and then the general election, primary in March. We never had discussion about doing a primary in March elections. Once we switched to November, we're switching to November.
I think the way to handle it is there's certain things in the minutes as opposed to this. If there's things in the minutes that you don't think are right, just make a motion to take them out. You know, just,
But yeah, I sent it back to
But I don't think that's
city
right.
staff. They didn't,
they can't do
They-
it. Once
okay,
the
they-
minutes are here.
they were going to verify and then bring it back to us. It was right in us.
Okay, so you want to defer it again?
Is it the things that were discussed in the meeting?
It's,
Because I had one
it's,
that was resolved.
okay, no, it had to do with it said in it that I had mentioned, talked about a primary in March with the general. And the discussion actually was, once we switch to November elections, based on the special act, we can't have primaries. So we've never, ever discussed, ever, even at the past charter, having primaries. So that,
Do
you know,
wanna
I would
defer it
just like
again?
to omit that from the minutes. and
Okay, so is
done
there
with
a
it.
specific sentence in the minutes that you think is wrong? Or
Yes,
let's get it and move to amendment. You know where it is in the minutes?
I said to the state.
That's October. You're talking about?
September.
September.
There was page 6. Third paragraph up, board moved on to section 3.09. Attorney Bengal recalled that ballot question had addressed this section because of concerns with ballot questions language. The city attorney's office was directed to amend the ordinance that amended the charter. City Chair Stern recalled that the public vote on proposed charter amendment that would change elections to a primary in March and general election in November for 3 4-year terms that would be consistent with county government. That was incorrect because there was no discussion, no action ever taken
So.
about primary. So if we want to just take that out
sentence out.
and do
I'll
it.
second it.
Other than the chair make a motion?
I will make the motion to amend the minutes to take out the sentence. So the corrected version will end in that paragraph, the word charter, and then pick up with, it would be, well, we actually don't need the modify price. So the last two sentences of that paragraph will.
It's actually just to take out that changing elections to a primary in March.
Perfect. So moved.
And I still second.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, we're taking out the
Yeah.
third paragraph on page 6, just the word election and replacing it with what paragraph?
It's third from the bottom,
Third from the bottom,
correct.
and we're replacing it with,
The public voted on proposed charter amendment that would
Make sure they
change
show it on a piece
elections
of paper.
to a general election in November. With 3
oh, I have it
terms.
up.
That's it.
Do you know what words we're?
Yeah,
taking
I
out?
have it up right here.
So you know what words we're taking out?
Yes, I just want to get the clarity on what words we're adding. That's what I want.
Are we adding any words? We're not adding any words.
It's not
We're
adding
just
anything.
taking away. Okay,
Taking a second to the last sentence.
and that's it, just that one word is coming out.
Not one word. No, it's just not one word, it's more than one word.
I think it's the second
I
to the
think
last
Harrison,
sentence.
why
am I
don't you
correct?
show her?
So
Right.
maybe, you know what the problem is? We have 2 separate drafts. So which draft are we looking at? Because it was corrected one time. So which draft do you guys have? When did this happen?
I picked that up from right there.
So this is the most recent one?
Yeah.
Okay,
And this is since the correction that I suggested.
okay, good. We're on the same page. Great. All right, got it. Thanks, you guys.
No, it's probably better than the other. Aye. And then.
Yeah. Any,
Oh, yes.
oh, yes, correct.
Approval of the minutes as amended.
Seconded.
Favor.
All opposed? No.
All right, so we've approved the minutes of the 7th and the 7th as amended and the October 5th, yeah.
Thank you, yeah.
And then the first item will be section 3.15.
We need to do approval of the October 5th.
I think we did it. well.
Yeah. Yeah, I only pulled the September 7th.
Okay, thank you. So at your suggestion, I looked at the city of Homestead's initiative and referendum procedure. You'll see in your material that provided a new version of 2.15, which basically adopts homesteads with one minor exception. So the city of Fort Lauderdale's current petition process begins with a committee of not less than 1,000 electors who sign a petition. And if the proposed ordinance is rejected, it takes signatures of 15% of the electors to get the proposal on a ballot. By contrast, the homestead procedure begins with a committee of 10 electors. So the homestead provision is bifurcated between initiative and referendum. So initiative is the power to propose ordinances with certain types of ordinances accepted. And it requires signatures of at least 15% of the electors for city commission consideration. Or if the city commission fails to adopt it, to get it on the ballot, which is the same as the current number to get on the ballot after commission rejection, as I said, that we already have. So referendum is the power to require reconsideration of any adopted ordinance, again, with certain exceptions, and that requires the signatures, it's a higher bar, it requires signatures of at least 25% of the electors. As I said, a higher bar for that, to repeal or to reconsider an adopted ordinance. So the way it works is, I'll start with commencement. So
Can I suggest, because that we take little bites at a time, and we may have a discussion of those numbers, whether we feel like those numbers
And-
are.
I'm gonna get to them also further.
And add in a little history because we have discussed this at prior chart review board meetings. And would be helpful for everyone to be aware of that as well, as to what we discussed.
Where are you reading from? Because I'm trying to follow you.
Well, I'm not reading, I'm reading.
Okay, you're just reading your notes.
From my notes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but you can follow, I mean, you can follow along.
Well, I'm
It's
on
right here.
Homestead plus I'm on ours, so I'm not
I
sure
would
where.
worry about it.
Okay,
It was just an example of something that I
gotcha.
wrote on.
I read this over earlier today.
But I pretty much almost adopted it in total, so you can find, you can see what I have, three
It's in
point one
the
five
draft.
underlined.
It's there.
Don, the one that's underlined, the one that is when.
Right on.
So I've divided it in, and I'm gonna do it in small pieces. I've divided it into how it's commenced. Petitions, action on petitions, submission to electors. And the election results. And after that, I'll try to give you the city of Fort Lauderdale's present process in a nutshell to compare, for comparison. So I'll start with commencement. As I said, it takes a minimum of 10 electors and they file an affidavit to the city clerk.
Can we go back one step?
Sure.
To, I have, again, I had you look at Homestead. I did that as an attorney. I'm now like in a different role. So my question is, Paul, under the initiative, there's certain limitations on when the initiative can be used. And that is, those are in the way that in the draft that you have. By the way, I'm not being critical, I'm just trying to raise this for discussion as to whether this should be in our charter. It says shall not extend to the annual budget or community investment plan, or an ordinance appropriating money, levying taxes, or setting salaries of officials or employees. So my first question is, I understand why the annual budget is there, because the annual budget is governed, a procedure governed by state law, has to be done by a certain time, and becomes a real problem if this process interferes with the budget. I understand why that's there. I don't know what a community investment plan is.
Okay, good point though, because that's that's our local language, because Homestead uses the term capital program.
But what is a community investment?
CFP is the capital.
Yeah,
Okay, so the first question I have, which is really an open-ended question. If the commission adopts some sort of capital improvement plan that people don't like, do they have the ability to use the petition process to overturn that plan? Under this, the way it's drafted now, they would not, because it's exempted from the petition, from the initiative process. So I raise it, I'm not expressing an opinion, I'm just raising it because it is an exclusion. The question is whether the exclusion should be there or not.
Yes.
So I would suggest not, the reason being that the budget and the capital improvement plan are adopted by resolution. So to change them, the law requires it to be done with the same dignity as it's originally adopted. So an ordinance couldn't really have an effect on what was adopted by resolution.
But-
Also, the community investment plan have multiple things in it.
Well, the
So
community
how would
investment
you-
plan is a 5-year,
Yeah, it's a
5-year running,
Yeah. Yeah.
5-year moving plan.
Right,
For the initiative section, the way it's written, basically applies to initiatives, which are basically are propose an ordinance.
Right.
But it's saying you can't propose an ordinance dealing with the budget. I understand that. And it says you can't propose an ordinance dealing with community investment plan.
And
Is that-
they go hand in hand, because the community investment plan is adopted with the budget by resolution.
So you're saying that they're eliminated here because they're not done by ordinance. So there never could be an ordinance dealing with.
That's my reason. I don't know what your reason was. when
I have
you
no
did
idea, it was
Homestead.
like 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow. But community investment plan, so that's the question for us to think about. I don't know.
Chris, do you have a question on that?
Not on that, but some of the other exclusions.
I do too. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. Can you please remember to state your name before you speak?
Thank you.
Only because they don't know who's speaking. They can't see.
Chris Burdick. I'm concerned about the changing of an actual zoning map designation of a parcel of parcels of land, and it seems to carry over from both the ordinance as well as the referendum. And we were talking before about parks and designation of parks and whether or not people would agree with the city trying to sell off a particular piece of property. I think it's so broad that it would limit, an ordinance to get involved if people are feeling, very upset over particular aspects of the.
Where are you seeing that they're
Well, maybe I'm looking at the wrong.
this is the one that
I'm looking at the old version.
all this work on
Okay.
deals with, looks like this.
Okay,
And there's, I don't see a reference.
I see. I looked at the old one last meeting.
Because I don't see a reference to that.
Okay. So maybe-
Take a minute.
And just for the little history, the charter, when it wrote for the 1,000 signatures, was back in 1983 and never has been changed. And the item always came forward to charter review and pass recommendations as something to be looked at for the purpose of discussing public land use. And that was always the main concern, sale, use, etc. of public lands. So with that, Chris, you want to continue?
No, I apologize. I was using the one from last meeting and yes, I see that this meeting has eliminated that word.
This is Richard. I think, Paul, you need to, something in the back. There's a difference between like rezoning by referendum and sort of designating parkland and the kind of things we were talking about. Paul, could you check for us? I believe there's a state statute that prohibits rezoning by referendum, but I'm not sure. It just is like in the back of my head. And so that would be another reason, but so you couldn't do it anyway. But
Circumvent our whole process.
yeah, I think. Do you know what I'm talking about?
And I think that's why I put it in the original, because if you're looking at
Yeah,
the one from last meeting, I think that's why I put it in there. And then when I was looking at it again, I made it exactly the way Homestead was, almost
There's no,
exactly.
magic. It was just like form for sort of.
I think that's why I put it in there originally, and you're right, it may not be necessary.
Well, could you check for us?
Yeah. I don't,
Did you have any other things in that little section that you wanted to talk about?
Not under section A, section B.
Okay, I have other questions under A.
Thank
Or yeah, A1. So my question is, why is an ordinance setting salaries of city officers, employees, part of this exemption?
It actually makes sense. The simple answer is because it was in Homesteads. But but it makes sense because the city's pay plan is by ordinance. So that would make sense.
I don't understand. This prohibits the electorate from changing that ordinance, change the pay plan.
Right, because. Well, they're city officers and employees and. Well, I guess that's a policy question. I guess that is a
I think it
policy
is.
question.
Part of the answer, I think, is since a lot of our employees are covered by collective bargaining agreements. And so those agreements are in place and that's approved by others. So that would be one thing. But okay, officers, maybe it's not healthy to have the public sort of involved in salaries of employees and stuff, but maybe it is. I
I don't think it makes sense.
Those,
think we should exempt.
And
Yeah, I don't think we should have the public weighing in on the salaries.
going back to what Richard's saying on anything dealing budgetary with the commission gets figured into the budget anyhow. So all the contract employees, all the union contracts are always in the anticipated budget. And I think that's more important going along with your rights.
And that's another reason for not having it in this section, because the budget is adopted by the city commission, and how could you leave it to the electors to change
Correct.
what's budgeted? even if they're not changing the budget, they're changing,
Be just to
they're
play.
changing salary.
I was gonna say, yeah,
Just to make that, they could budget money and theoretically, the elector could say, you know what, I think you're spending too much, I'm sorry, don't use the whole budget.
Richard raised a very interesting point. What happens if the city commission decides they're gonna triple their salary? And they,
They did do that.
But
yes,
that's,
but I'm saying that you have a groundswell of, you know, citizens that say, well, wait a minute. We don't approve that. And I'm not arguing for or against, but I'm just giving an example where you may want to have some kind of initiative that will, you know, allow the citizens to voice their opinions on that.
there's a different charter section on that. And they can own, and they set their salary and benefits by resolution no later than 18 months before the next commission takes office. So they can't vote themselves any change or benefits.
That presupposes that there'd be a different commission.
Well, there will
Well,
be. there would be
it was
six.
very obvious in 2018. They came in and then one of the first things they did is vote themselves almost triple, as you said, salaries and added benefits because they put themselves in a state retirement plan. But it was not effective until 2020. So whether they were there or not, it would be effective.
Well, I just put that out as a
Right.
example, but
And-
not interfere with the budget process. and stuff.
And then it goes into the budget planning for the future years. So again,
Allow me to correct myself. I said 18 months before the new commission takes office. I believe what it is by July, a year before. So I'm not sure how many months that is. I mean, I can look at it if you want. but 15 minutes, whatever. By July of the year before.
So the question is, as drafted, this excludes those things that are listed or based on the same page. Are we okay with, the same ones are reflected in B. Initiative means the power to start an ordinance, sort of enact an ordinance, and a referendum is the one to reconsider an ordinance. And so the question is, are we comfortable with those exemptions in those two sections?
yeah, well,
Add something to that because I thought about it obviously as I was putting this together, and there are a couple of others that you might want to consider. One is big franchise agreements are done by ordinance. So like the FPL agreement, there's People's Gas or whatever it's called, it used to be called. Like Tico, yeah. Those big franchise agreements are done by ordinance, so it wouldn't make sense for the electorate to be involved in that. So those kinds of ordinances perhaps. And the other one I thought of, which may take some discussion, is charter amendments. Because charter amendments are started, well, however they're started, but they involve an ordinance of the city commission typically. So should it be up to the electorate to start a charter amendment by ordinance?
well,
And I was.
we make our recommendations to the commission.
Right, but I
Either
was
they
wondering
vote
if-
to adopt it or they vote to reject it.
But I was-
And then whatever is adopted, then they put on the ballot and all of the voters vote.
Right, but should charter amendment ordinances be exceptions to the initiative process, I guess is my question, or something to consider?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't feel strongly about the other, one, but I think that if the electorate maintains the city charter, they should be able to put it on the
Absolutely.
ballot themselves and change the charter.
I mean, that's the whole concept. From every constitution on down, this is no different than
I mean,
state or
I've
federal
been involved in
constitution.
a lot of situations where, there was, let's say, a maximum height limitation in the city charter and the citizens didn't think it was high enough. So they didn't think it was low enough.
That's what
Yeah,
they-
They
never heard of that
thought it
way.
was too high, and so they filed a petition, put in something on the ballot to amend the charter.
And that's more along the lines, basically, the referendums that we see, the petitions that get filed, it's basically always been based on land use issues more so than any other item. Richard, some of the other cities that you have, and taking a look at City of Miami or Weston or Boca, what would be some of the concepts that,
I have to look, I mean, the charters and blend together. Even in terms of what else would they exclude? I mean, my inclination is to exclude as little as possible. I mean, this is power, it's a power of the people. Unless there's a very good reason, like the budget or something like that, to exclude, you know, to take power away from the electorate, I wouldn't want to do.
Jackie?
How does everybody feel about what Paul said about the franchise agreements? I mean, those agreements are probably what, 20 years or something? I mean, those
We've
are.
always left that in the
Pardon
charter. We've always left that to be applicable here in the charter.
Okay, so the voters can.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Can I add one thing about charter amendments, and why maybe it should actually be in the, perhaps it should be in there. By statute, and that's section 166.031. It starts out by saying the governing body of the municipality may, by ordinance, and this is key, or the electors of a municipality may, by petition, signed by 10% of the registered electors as of the last preceding municipal general election, submit to the electors a proposed amendment to the charter. So there's already a statutory mechanism for it, which would be separate from this 15%.
So it's not affected by the special act at all.
I don't think the special act addresses that.
I'm comfortable with that.
So
But I don't think it need to be excluded here, just.
it speaks for itself. It
Supersedes.
speaks for itself.
And I think the real discussion is in the charter from 1983, it says 1,000 signatures. And we are here in 2023. However, when you look at state law, and a lot of what we're trying to do is clean up the errors of this charter so that we are on the same page as state law and the county law that governs over municipalities. Under state law, it's 1% of the registered voters at the previous general election. So it's not who voted, but it's by the registration for the date of that general election. So again, if we want to do anything, I can't see 10%, 15%, 25%. I would rather stick with consistency of state law,
Which
which
is
would be
1%.
1%. And based on the numbers you're talking about, 132,800 people would be 1% of who's been registered, because obviously our registration population has grown in 40 years. So numbers from 40 years ago aren't quite applicable, but at least we're showing a consistency with state law.
So we would go from 1,000 votes to 13,000, you said?
100, yeah. It's 1% of 132,800 people.
I was
No,
looking
I
to.
think it's doing that.
It's 1,300,
It's 1,300.
328.
Yeah,
I think 1% is very low.
But the state is.
I think it's.
But let me just bring a reality check to that. We've had historically 1,000 voters. And over the last 7 years, I believe there's only been 3 initiatives that's been filed. I don't think, given our past statistics, that we're saying the city's going to be flooded with petitions. And, you know, if we're looking for citizens being able to have a voice in government, if we're going 15%, that's 19,915 people have to sign a petition. You're never
Is
going
this
to.
for the referendum or the initiative?
They're both the same.
Well,
There's a little bit-
15% is for the initiative,
25%.
25% is for the referendum, and that's
That's
33,000.
Too many people.
Yeah, I mean, you're never gonna, I mean, that's barring any chance whatsoever of getting.
So do you think it should be a percentage like Judy was?
I like the
saying?
1%, that's
For
consistent
both
with
for
the
both of
guidance.
them, do you think they should be the same? For both? One is to adopt an ordinance, another one is to reject an ordinance that the city commission has already adopted. Do you think they should be the same number?
I don't see
Yeah,
any
I
reason
don't see any
why,
reason to.
why not?
So let's change them both. So I would,
And goes back to the theory of everything we've worked on since January, anything that we can do to clean up here, to put us in consistency with county and state law.
so let's put that on hold just for 1 second.
Okay,
Next section is,
Can I ask a question on that? I
Yes.
apologize. I don't want to slow things down, but as I was reading today and they talked about, you would submit your committee of 10 to the city clerk or whoever to. What I don't know, what's not spelled out is if you get a group of 10 people that are your committee and their job is to go out and get 1% of the votes. The way it reads is the only people that can sign have to sign in front of one of those 10 people.
Oh, that's a different section that I think
Okay.
we're all going to.
we'll get to that.
Okay.
so we
That would make a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
so then we're trying to clean everything up to be
So,
consistent with that.
with this, the draft says the minimum of 10 electors. Well, Paul, why don't you go through just the first, the section of dimension of proceedings?
So a minimum of 10 electors. File an affidavit with the city clerk stating that they will be the petitioner's committee. And will be responsible for circulating the petition and filing it in proper form. At the committee's request, the clerk. At, at the committee's request and expense, the clerk issues the petition blanks. So it gives, provides the forms, creates the forms and provides. At the committee's expense. Proposed ordinance is subject to the city attorney's approval as to legal sufficiency prior to circulation of petition blanks.
So going back to the issue that you were just raising, it's a minimum of 10, but you could have 100 on the committee.
Okay, it says, okay, that's what I was
Yeah,
trying to
it's a
clean up
minimum.
on my brain.
Right? Yeah, minimum. So
Okay,
you could have as many, the idea of it is that. You know, we possible to think about people forging signatures and stuff in this day and age, you know, but it happens a lot. And signatures, so somebody needs to be there to say, I saw Jackie sign the signature and I showed her a copy of the ordinance.
do they have to be on that committee?
They have to be on the committee, but you could have a committee of 100,
Right,
but they all just need to follow the format. So I think that sort of, it's not limited to those 10.
good. It clears up in my mind.
Now with this model,
Nice. Chris.
Well, I think we're jumping ahead a bit as to how we're going to sign these. But again, as a practical matter, if you're limiting who can circulate a petition,
Yes.
that takes away, the community involvement, because in the past, people would get involved and they would take the petitions and they would have other people, to sign them.
Without being on some sort of a committee.
Without being on a committee, it's just the citizens themselves saying, this is a great idea, let me run next door and let me get my signatures here. And that goes again systemically as to how this is done. Historically, it's been approved by the supervisor of election. They would look at the signatures, they would approve the signatures, and therefore we don't need people to attempt for each one. Oh, I was there. I mean, that's gonna be a hindrance.
And the way it works on state law, and the state is constantly changing it. So now under state law, you can't get paid to go and collect it, right? And Harrison knows this extremely well, but I agree. And to me, that's the following step. We are not the verifier of any signatures on elections. You sign a petition, and I'm assuming you don't have the same oath as like a voter registration. The supervisor of the elections is the only person that has the ability to verify a signature and information that's on the petition card. So when I do candidates signing up to get on the ballot by petition, it's the supervisor of elections, because everything has to be cross-referenced. It's 10 cents a card, but cross-reference to match up signature, date of birth, address, and everything to verify. So I don't believe it should be in the city clerks, since they don't have the ability to have the verification powers.
Yeah, that's one of the big differences, because this model doesn't involve a supervisor.
Right, and I think that's a terrible flaw that we have, because I know in the past there have been petitions that have been turned in, and when I would go there, end up, this many were from out of state, and this many were really from the neighborhood. But, you know, supervisor elections like this. since they
Again,
have
under
everyone-
this model, the way that it was done, because there was so many fraudulent signatures, that somebody needs to be on the hook for saying, I saw Judy Stern sign this, here's my affidavit, and Judy Stern signed it. And that's where this model came from.
And we do that even on the state level, where sometimes if the signature is not legible, then you have to be certified to be able to go out there and recertify it and bring it back to the
And is the
supervisor's office.
supervisor.
And it's all
elections
through the
will-
supervisor
they-
elections.
Are they willing to do that certification?
Yes.
Yeah,
They do it
yeah.
for me. It
They
costs,
do everything,
costs the city.
and it's tens of thousands.
The people
Oh,
submitting.
No, we're talking about taking it out of the hands of city clerk's office, because city clerk doesn't have the access to the data.
Because the committee is at a,
So yeah, the committee, the people who are submitting the signatures have to pay the supervisor of elections 10
Right.
cents per signature.
To verify.
To verify it.
And that
And
takes
so-
care of this overhead of each person on the committee having to take the responsibility that, yes, this person really.
So basically what you're suggesting is anybody get a copy of the petition,
Yes,
of the petition, and get anybody they want to sign it.
well,
They give it-
anybody who's an elector within the city.
But, right, but they can get anybody to sign it. I mean, they could have somebody from
Yes.
Utah sign it. right?
Yes, and
And then it goes to the supervisor of elections, and they have the capability of
Correct.
going and saying, okay, Chris Burdick lives in Utah.
or they would probably say we don't have them on our rolls.
So it won't matter
Yes,
who,
but Jackie,
so it won't
It
matter
doesn't matter
who
got
actually
the
gave
signature.
them
right,
the petition to sign,
It's
where our documents
verification.
say. There's a signature. So we're suggesting we change that?
But that's the way it is currently,
So you like what you have better.
right.
at least with that part of the process.
Wait, I'm sorry, come again? I don't think I followed. So you would like to keep, I'm sorry, which part?
They're basically,
Harris-
they're basically saying this model uses the city clerk
Right.
to issue blanks and also to certify the signatures. And what's being suggested is that's the city clerk not be involved in that process and it be done by the county supervisor of election.
Sorry, I thought what you said at the end modified that to the point where there was something that we were keeping.
Well,
Because in the past, the supervisor of elections always certified the signatures on petitions submitted to the city.
I do like the idea of the city attorney's office approving these petitions before they're circulated. I think it's horrible when people go out and get all these petitions
And I
circulated.
totally agree
And
with
then
you on
the
that.
city attorney's office says, that's not legal, you can't do that, because that's such a waste.
And I think it's very important that they have to come in and sit with the city attorney to make sure that the language is
So Paul, let's
legally
leave that one
sufficient.
and go
Try not
back
to
to
waste
the
people's
other
time.
ones. That's all right. Okay, sure. So you bring that back for next time. So we didn't change A1 and 2 on here. But we've changed 3 a lot. And now we're back to the question, which is how many signatures it takes. This is 15 and 25%. I think it's being suggested that it be 1%.
I think that we stick with being consistent again. And make it follow the same laws as state law. And that way, if it changes at the state, changes on us, we don't have to address it.
Harrison Glenn Williams, I'll
Yes.
make that as a motion. I am happy to move that we change 3.15 C 1 and 2 to remove references to 15 and 25% of the electors. And to instead substitute language that says we are going to use the percent as required by state law.
Do you want to put it like that or you want to put 1%?
I think if, as the chair knows, the state does change this more often than I think any of us would like. Provided that we're being consistent with state law, making an explicit reference just means we're gonna have to change it.
I'd like to go to the 1% just because I believe it's easier for someone who's reading the charter to understand what it is that's required.
I amend my motion to state 1% or the minimum required by the state.
I'll second it.
That does, but that doesn't give any clarity. To Chris's point. Because then he still doesn't, by somebody looking at the chart, they still don't know because if they say, okay, what does state law say?
Well, I'm saying take out the state law.
No, but he's suggesting put it back in. He's saying
Oh.
1% or the minimum required by state law is his motion.
Okay, and
And
Right.
see,
That was.
Yeah.
But again, I'm happy to make this a consensus item. I see.
I'm good with the
then
1%.
I think just
I
1%.
think this is, but it's right. They can read the charter, take a look at it and know what it is.
and actually, if we're going to make the recommendation, we need to make sure it's clarified that's recommendation from the draft or recommendation of what we actually have in the
Well, we're
existing
gonna,
charter,
actually, we're gonna come back. We're
which I'm hoping we'll
gonna
do
do
in
another
January.
round again, where Paul goes back and redrafts all this stuff in accordance with our conversations. And we have another draft in front of us, so we're not approving things that we don't actually.
That's what I would like to see in January is a whole charter
Paul,
basically.
I
coming
think
back
it would
to
be,
us.
sorry with you, I know you gave us a lot of information. You could just give us the amended draft as opposed to giving us the old one and the new one and this one and that one. Just give us what that they would be amended, so people know exactly what they're looking, what they're looking at, and looking at the wrong. Okay, keep on going. We've taken care of that.
One question, it's showing the change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just,
So just to be clear, the motion that I have.
James.
I'm sorry,
James, I'm sorry.
Harrison, Grant Williams, so the motion that I am now making is to take out the reference to 15% and 25% respectively, and to replace it with 1%. Period.
I'll second.
all in favor?
All in favor?
Ms. Burdick, seconded.
All opposed?
Okay. Paul, since we're going with what state law is talking about, the state law cover that it's gotta be in ink and it's gotta be certified, blah, 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 or do we need to keep that in here?
I'll have to look.
Okay, so if you could, my suggestion is that we suspend talking about this thing, this section for a while, because Paul's gotta redo the whole thing. So that, just on this section, because we've dealt with the important items, which is the 1%. The topics that are excluded, the rest is.
And this, and moving from
and
city
moving
clerk.
from the city,
to it.
we've dealt with those things, and so all of this needs to be, sorry, Paul, all this needs to be redone in accordance with that.
Part of what should or could be continued to discuss right now.
Yeah.
Is from the original charter, what the city commission should
Right,
do.
right, at the bottom of the second page, it says actions on petitions, it's part of the draft. That's what part of Paul's draft.
Yeah, right here, bottom.
So
So let's go through this section.
So under action, the city commission considers a petition at its next regular meeting.
which is what needs to be cleaned up.
Well, I skipped the section on petitions.
Go to the action on petition.
Right now.
Okay, so it has 40 days, the city commission then has 40 days within.
No, with your drafts.
For 45 days. or
45
bill.
E, item 1.
E1.
Right, so the city commission fails to adopt.
But let's just go slow. On receipt of this certificate determining petition sufficient, the city commission shall promptly consider. I don't like the word consider. I think they should have to vote on it. Consider means they could just fool around with it.
And by taking your same thoughts. It said, write in this about the next regular meeting. And that creates a problem. What's the interpretation of next regular meeting? It should be the next action meeting, because as you're saying, Richard, about being able to vote on it. Next regular meeting, it's a conference agenda meeting. It's
I
what-
think this issue of the meeting,
And a conference agenda meeting, you can't take action.
I think this issue of meetings is creating a lot of confusion. It's come up before in our discussions. I'm wondering whether we should.
No, I take just to
Just finish
comment.
first, Richard. Well,
Who's
Richard,
on
finish
to
first.
speak, so I'll just. No, I mean, I think a regular meeting is always known where the commission votes, not a conference meeting. So when you specify a regular meeting, look at all the agendas of the city. You have a conference agenda and a regular agenda where they conduct and vote on business. So I don't have a problem with the language of regular.
Well,
For that
I
reason.
differ with that because the city manager creates the agenda. And the last petition that came up, they put it on the conference agenda saying that that's the next regular meeting. So unless we clarify so that the manager, when he prepares an agenda, understands that the next regular meeting is the action meeting, not the conference agenda.
So why don't we put
We just went
into,
through that.
why don't we put into the charter, because this is a recurring issue.
Correct.
Just a definition. At one point as to what is the regular meeting,
Meeting,
and then we don't have to.
That's what you define, that's what I.
right, because we just went through this up with the pickleball.
Well, it
will
happens
be-
with the election too. I mean, it comes up with, the next, start, sworn in at the next regular meeting, what's the regular meeting? I think that's the right thing to do.
Paul,
By ordinance presently, the meetings of the city commission begin at 1:30. It's really one meeting. The difference is that by ordinance, motions, resolutions, and ordinances are heard after 6. That's what meant, and for convenience and for convenience, that's called convenience. The afternoon meeting is called conference because they don't take any action. An evening meeting is called
Correct.
regular, but it's really all one meeting. It's just that
I think
they
it's
can't take
very-
action
and
until after
again,
6.
it's the city manager's agenda. He drafts it, he writes it, he gives it to you for legal review, he puts it out. So therefore, it needs to be clarified. If he doesn't understand that he puts on a conference agenda, it doesn't do the public
I
any
think
good.
all this stuff about conference agenda and is all by ordinance that could be changed. And I think that Chris is right. I think there should be I mean, some cities say, some charters say, the city commission shall by resolution set a regular commission meeting, they do it by resolution or annually set or something like that, the first meeting in whatever. That's one. Another way we could say it is just say it, but I wouldn't want to say it's got to be a certain date.
No, I agree with you there. I was just talking about a definition.
Right.
And the charter is what is a regular
So
meeting.
what would you say? What would you say? How would you do it?
I would defer to Paul and to Judy because.
Action
usually
meeting
the action
versus
meeting. I don't know.
I don't want, this whole business with the swearing in, there's the swearing in, there's the pickleball, now we have it with this. There shouldn't be any confusion. It should be very clear and no room going around.
Correct.
If it takes action, if it requires action, it's after 6.
But that's by ordinance and that could be changed.
Of course.
So if we just put it in the charter at an appropriate place, if there's a definition section. Put it in as a definition. And we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, regular, and then define what regular is.
Right.
Anytime.
Paul, bring it up. So now what it says is that
One second, Rob. Are you suggesting by charter section or or by ordinance?
charter.
No, in the charter section.
In the charter.
Fine, right.
So they get, the commission gets presented with a certificate determining that petition is sufficient. And they shall promptly, it says, consider the proposed initiative or reconsider the referred ordinance by voting its repeal at its next regular meeting. If the city commission fails to adopt the proposed initiative without any change within 45 days or fails to repeal the ordinance, then it goes on to the ballot.
So the next regular meeting here is, in this instance.
That's voting, so it's a voting meeting.
Okay, but it's also related to D 3 and 4. So when the clerk presents the certificate to the city commission, as a final determination.
Clerk's gonna be doing it now, or the supervisor of elections gonna be doing it?
Well, it'll be the,
Supervisor of elections certifies the petition requirement.
To whom they should make the certificate.
They then issue it to the city clerk. So that can be entered into the public record and then brought forward to the commission on the
Okay, so
agenda.
that needs to be written into
right.
on the receipt of the citations from the city clerk.
But my point is that it is what is meant in one by the next regular meeting. It's counted from D3.
Right, because in D3, it talks about voting on it, so we understand. E1 doesn't. So that needs to be clarification.
what are you
that it
saying,
comes back to the
D3?
election.
I'm just saying, in E1,
Right.
question is, when is the next regular meeting? From what point? I guess, I think was the question. The next regular meeting from when? But from what is in D3, which is when.
It says upon receipt of a certificate determining a petition
So
sufficient.
we're looking at E1. Not
So
D3,
that's the date that it
we're looking
starts.
at E1.
So the date that the commission receives a certificate from the clerk under D3,
Right.
that's the date of receipt. And it's gotta be within 45.
45 days.
or
But
30.
we're looking at D3, shouldn't it read now if petition or amended petition is certified sufficient by the supervisor
Yeah,
of election?
yeah,
he's gonna
then it's-
change
Yeah, that have to change, yeah.
And so the commission gets a certification from the clerk based upon the supervisor of elections. And if the city commission fails to basically agree with what the petitioners say within 45 days or 30 days, then it's submit the proposed or referred petition to the electors. So
Yeah, 45 days for initiative and 30 for a referred ordinance.
And it doesn't really refer to any kind of meeting. They just have to do it within that certain amount of time. And they have to figure out the meeting schedule.
And otherwise, and if not,
Let me ask you that question, since we went through that. No way around it.
No, I'm shaking my head.
Yeah,
at
I'm
what went on.
thinking.
I'm shaking it in my head.
Yeah, because, I mean,
What's the question?
well. Who calls a meeting? So if there's not a quorum. Or. What we went through here was, they were saying, oh, the mayor wasn't
But
available,
in
the
this,
city
but
attorney.
in this
wasn't
case, it doesn't matter. Because if they don't either adopt the ordinance or repeal the ordinance, it goes on the ballot. It doesn't require a meeting. So if people decide not to have a meeting, it's fine. The time's just gonna pass and it's gonna go on the ballot. So there's no.
And they knowingly
Fooling around,
ignored.
That's a good point.
right?
yeah, because otherwise a proposed or referred ordinance goes to the electors. So, under submission to electors, an election is held not less than 45 nor more than 60 days from the city commission action. Except that if there is a regular election within 6 months from that date, then the regular election will be used for submission to the electors.
This section could have come out of that charter, but it just didn't make sense to me. It says it's gotta be not less than 45 or 60 days. This, by the way, is from the Dade County Home Rule Charter. That's what it was. For the day the commission redeemed to after the paragraph. No regular election to be held within 6 months, so. If there is a regular election, then you have 6 months. It's gotta be on that ballot within the 6-month election. That's what you're saying.
If there's an election within 6 months, it's on the regular election.
But it says of a special election not to be held not less than 45 to more than 90 days from such date. I didn't really understand. Even though I may have written.
And again. Richard, you said this came out of Miami-Dade.
The 45 and 60 days comes out of the, I think it says 45 and 90.
Because Miami-Dade has a totally
They're-
different
they have-
election schedule than Broward County does.
Can we talk conceptually about what this should be and then Paul can write it?
Yeah,
This is a little-
it's impractical, I think, to have an election
So what,
within 60 days.
That's what I was just thinking.
well, it's also
Well, you
very
can't-
expensive, we can't.
Yeah.
but
Well-
it's
Exactly.
very-
Yeah, and we do have an issue because of mail out ballots in state law. So it's 60 days, et cetera.
Yeah,
the
no, it's
overseas, so-
impractical.
Maybe we
It's
should just say that if they don't take any act, if they don't do what the petitioners say, they've got to have an election within 6 months or some period of time. So they can't,
Which I think is fair because we have to take into consideration the supervisor election schedule
yes.
and working with their office. Yes, Jackie?
What if there's an election in 9 months? Is the charter gonna force us to have a special election within 6 months and then another election in 9 months? We can piggyback it all together?
It's
That seems
cheaper
like a
to
big
do it-
waste of
it's
money.
Cheaper to do it that way, but the question is how long these people are.
A year,
Want to say.
maybe,
Well, you
maybe we say
can't-
within a year, just in case.
By contrast, the city's current provision says that if there's a scheduled election not less than 30 days and not more than 60 days after such meeting, the ordinance is submitted at such election.
Which is very unlikely that there's going to be election. It just is a pot.
If no election is held within that time, then there's a special election.
You know, what would be helpful? Again, going back to the supervisor's office to see if they have a process in place that they can recommend to us.
Yeah, because going to.
You know, the other thing is that when people are gaining petitions and they know they want to make a change and they know what the rules are, they typically make sure they get everything done in a proper time frame. And what we're doing is we're trying to accommodate something that we don't know. We could end up spending a ridiculous amount of money.
And that's why we're saying if we work with the supervisor of elections office, then we have guidelines. Because they have their own schedule that they like.
I
to
mean,
work
if you want
with.
to save money, you just say it should be placed on the ballot in every regular or special election, period. But that could be a long time.
That could be 40
Right.
days.
Yeah,
But the
you can't-
person collecting.
you can't- You can't do that. Why don't we work with
Yeah, we
the
can reach out to them.
supervisor's office,
Yeah.
get their schedule of recommendations.
Because the 6 month issues didn't raise before, not in this forum, but I think that was chosen because in almost every year, you're going, even in odd number years, you're gonna have some municipalities doing an election month. There's every even year, primary in August, general in November. So I think if the standard is what the supervisor has as an election, a time that they are issuing ballots, generally, not just the electors of Fort Lauderdale. Within 6 months is a pretty, you're almost always going to hit.
Well, let's check with them. Let's see, Judy suggested,
Yeah.
check with them. Maybe you say it's got to be in the next special or general election, but not longer than X. So at some point, they got to hold a special election.
I think we need to clarify that we can piggyback on another municipality's election,
So, yeah,
not
so
just our special
Right.
election.
Okay, so let's get.
I volunteer to reach out to Joe Scott's office and ask him to come to the next meeting.
Yeah, and ask Nate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I
maybe,
know that-
yeah, we would have, Paul and I were trying to get together with Nate, but we never quite did that. So maybe you could ask him to
Sure.
schedule a call with us, because we were trying to talk about a couple of these issues to try to save some time.
Yeah, he's happy to come back to our next meeting if we want to have him back here in December and go through it.
Excuse me, Richard, so what are you suggesting for him to come back to the meeting
No.
or call?
Either one.
I mean, I think
You can do it by a conference
we can have a
call.
call, it's great.
He's happy to do it either way.
And Harrison, maybe you want to do it with Paul, because you and I can't do it together.
Yeah, although I defer to your legal mind.
I'll do it with Paul.
Oh, you can.
Paul and I have a call with him, and if you could just ask him to please try to accompany us.
Mhm.
And we'll be very flexible. I had a question on just 3, Paul, as you're redrafting, whether 10 days prior to the election is, that's a supervisor of election question. Somebody, and if they can withdraw, if they can have everything all excited about, but in 10 days, they withdraw the petition. Didn't sound right to me.
No, or would they?
Yeah, there's gotta be some, because there's a lot of expense to get ready for the election, all that. It's gotta be some period out of.
There is a period that they work with too, as far as withdrawing things from the ballot. So again,
Your
have that discussion with them. Because of the limitations that state puts on them as to the time that they have to prepare a draft written ballot
Right.
for review.
Okay. That's great. I'm glad we got through that. So Paul, you're gonna do redraft. We have some questions to ask. We have some research to do on the zoning issue. We have some stuff. Okay. So let's move on to 303, which is the qualification of members. Just for,
Richard, wait, just let me ask. And someone back here. Who else is down here too, so. I'm sitting up here if you want to join us. Do you have any questions on the sections before we move on?
Actually, you've covered most everything. I was gonna give you a real life check of what happens in this process. And go through the two that, I've done two of the three, so I was gonna tell you what actually happened.
Very
Can you just get a little closer?
All right,
and
all
say
right.
your name?
I was trying to give you that was, yeah. That's, where's the money? Yeah. But you've really covered a lot of the things, but I'm just gonna go through this with you really quickly anyways. You've got 100, I don't know how many days you have for the process right now. We did 2 petitions in March of 2016. We notified the city on March 25th of 2016, on August 2nd of 2016. I emailed the city attorney Cynthia Everett and Dwayne Spence, but the supervisor of elections have notified me that both petitions were certified. I would tell you that's just over 90 days. We had more than 1,000 signatures to get to your verification process. There is no doubt the supervisor of elections is well equipped to do this. We had more than we needed, but they also disqualified many that were not registered voters. And that's the measure of it. Are they registered voters in the city of Fort Lauderdale? Not, do they wish they were, are they out, like you said, Utah? No, they have to be here. Supervisor does that. And I want to tell you that they were so nice. I was so sorry to hear about Brenda Stipes today because they were so wonderful to us and it's just so gracious and respectful. And they didn't really take a position on anything. They just made you feel good about participating in the process. So we got that to the city on August 2nd. On August 11th, which is over 2 months later, Attorney Spence wrote me that on August 2nd, 2016, I had written requesting assistance. Now we were notified by the supervisor that we had submitted these, so that may be something you want to tighten up. But he told me that the city didn't get notification until whenever. I got the letter on October 11th. So now he would help us with drafting the ordinance, which was what was required. I have copies of this letter so you can see his exact verbiage, which is pursuant to the city charter, the city attorney will draft the respective ordinances in proper form and a legal opinion with 30 days, which is November 10th, 2016. So you're probably thinking we got them on November 10th or before. But actually on November 14th, we got a letter telling us why our petitions didn't qualify. Our petitions that they had seen some 6 months before and had been verified by the supervisor in August, and now 3 months, over 3 months later, we're getting it. So those are just some of the things that I'm hoping you tighten up. It is a wonderful process. You know, there were people that wanted to challenge and go on and do whatever, but we actually got some concessions of things that we hope to see out of this. So it does open a dialogue, whether you persevere or you don't. It really opens the dialogue on a lot of things. I think it's a very valuable.
So did it end up going on the ballot or no?
We wanted a city commission meeting. It didn't go anywhere. They never talked about it. But I'm glad you brought that
I
up.
understand.
We're hoping you'll talk about our long-term issue of coming up with a city philosophy on public lands, defining public lands and public purpose. And of course, they are well-defined in many different places, so that should be easy for you. But that was the conversation we had hoped to have in 2016.
So what happened?
It's nothing.
Nothing happened. We was gonna write the ordinance, and then over a month later, he told us that
He couldn't write it
Oh,
because
so you basically ended the process and said, which all the work you had done was a waste.
all the work we
Is
did.
there a
Okay,
reason
I
for
think
that?
we,
I
Well,
think we,
actually, I learned something today. One of the reasons was, I'll have to read the exact letter to you, but that we were asking for something to potentially go on the ballot. We were actually asking for an ordinance or to go on the ballot on a definition on public lands and public purpose. They told us they couldn't, you couldn't have a citizens group ask to put something on the ballot. In that process, they couldn't ask for an ordinance. And probably 3 years later, the city attorney told us that we could resolve the whole issue on public lands through ordinance. So did he give us a reason? Yes, I'll give you the letter. You can decide whether it was valid.
Richard, based on that and your knowledge, Harrison, based on that and your knowledge, do you understand or do you
I
see?
think that we
I thought
we
we
put into
well
our
corrected.
process that before the petition is circulated.
That's the most
And
important
the,
thing.
the petition and the, are all gonna be, approved by the city attorney's office for legal sufficiency.
I
before
think
it's
you guys have
circulated.
done a fantastic job.
Can we put a
I
time
think
limit
it's
though on
really
this
important,
whole
yeah.
consideration? That's another thing, 3 months later, you have to wait.
Yeah,
Unless that's, what would be a reasonable time for the city attorney to look at the petition and to,
Going back to Richard, your intent, and I thought the intent was when the city attorney approves the form for the petition, that's the language of what the actual
Well, the
ordinance
ordinance,
is.
the ordinance has got to be attached.
Right,
And you're done.
so
That's it.
it's not just
So-
petitioning what it is, it's where
I
you're
wanted to
getting
tell
the
you-
Well, let's make
ordinance
sure-
already approved.
That would, in the approval of the city attorney, it's the petition blank and
The
proposed
actual
ordinance.
ordinance.
That way the people won't be wasting their.
this is what we did.
Yeah.
It requires the signature, the address, the city of Fort Lauderdale zip code, the date of birth and or voter's registration number, the voting precinct and the date
Did it
signed.
require the ordinance to be attached, the actual
Well,
ordinance?
But that's what we're saying that we would require.
Wait, let me tell
first.
you the confusion on that. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you. I forgot about that. All right, we define what we want it done, but the way the charter reads, and a lot of attorneys were involved in this. I'm not an attorney, but there were many who were volunteers working on this. The way we read it, the city drafts the ordinance once we get this through, and that was the confusion.
Yeah, we're changing that process.
They could have told us anytime, but I would tell you instead of having one ordinance attached and 25 signatures on that one ordinance, which nobody's gonna read, a simple form like this, everybody read it. A lot of them offered their opinions on what we could do
But the
differently
thing
next
is
time.
that, well, under the process that
Yeah.
I've used, people should have the opportunity if they
Of
want
course.
to actually read the ordinance, so. The ordinance, the process that we've sort of changed a lot, but had the ordinance attached to the
To
petition.
the actual
And that- and
petition,
that's
that
fine.
way it's done.
That way it's done, first of all, it's done, but also somebody could look at it and say, well, the little description that you gave, that misled me.
So in order for this to work the way you're saying, give me the mechanics again. What you're
Petitioner-
saying.
The petition. the
I wanna do a
committee is
petition.
formed.
Uh-huh.
They then do a draft of the ordinance that they wanna, it could be something as simple as ordinance, blah, blah, blah is repealed. But if it's something where they wanna pass an ordinance,
Correct.
they would have to do a draft of the ordinance. They would submit it to the city attorney for review.
Mhm,
The city attorney would then, review it for legal sufficiency.
mhm.
And they would know right then whether what they've drafted is legally sufficient or not.
And is the city
Before-
attorney
this
then
is before
obligated
the
to
work.
fix it?
This
So it
before
means,
what?
This is before the work of taking the petition out to get the
Yes.
Correct.
signatures.
so is the city attorney, are we obligating the city attorney to go ahead and do the correct language? Not just say, this isn't
We
gonna work.
could, we could,
In other
that's
words, I
putting,
mean-
that's basically, that's putting a burden on the city attorney's office to redraft something and spend time on something he doesn't know whether it's gonna, or she. doesn't
Right.
Know what it's gonna be about, or he could just say, listen, the thing you've drafted is, maybe we should add a line and say, if the city attorney finds the proposed ordinance to be legally insufficient, he or she shall specify in detail the defects in the proposed ordinance. That way he's not redraft.
That's what I'm thinking. So now we've got
So
something
you
that
got
they
some
can actually
substance.
use.
The current
Harrison, no.
One of the things that I'm just bringing to bear, with constitutional amendments, which I'm more familiar with, there's a limit of, I believe, 75 words that.
Same thing with the ballot.
That's the that's
Same
yeah,
thing with the
ballot.
ballot.
And so I think that so long as there is, again, that the ordinance meets legal sufficiency as valid, that verified by the city attorney's office. The description on the petition, I don't think has to be the entire draft ordinance, just because I'm familiar with how many pages those can be. I feel like it's sort of onerous on the petition gatherers. But so long as the city attorney signs off on the description, that equivalent 75 words or whatever limit we're having, I'm fine with this being a simpler form.
So you don't think the people that are signing the petition need to see the ordinance?
I think so long as that's available to the public in greater detail, like posted online somewhere. I just don't think that you need to necessarily have a printout for attached to every single petition.
And can I just say, the reason that I agree with that is because, and I'm gonna send this so you can see, I know it's not perfect, but just, it was volunteers. Okay, because the charter is very clear that the city attorney drafts the ordinance. If you have a good enough description of what you're intending to accomplish, then the city attorney is the appropriate person to draft the ordinance, not a bunch of volunteers. The most important part of this is the general description and making sure they're registered voters, because, you know, we can go down to the beach, and we have during Tortuga, to get petitions signed for anything in the world.
I think we already
But
did
this is
that
different.
going
Yeah,
to the city.
okay, I don't know if you want these or not, but
No, I
I can
think-
show you what we did.
I think that they've raised, or she's raised a good point between. So the question is. Two couple of questions. First, who should be drafting this ordinance? And one side of the city attorney should be. The other hand, he or she could get a lot of requests from citizens committees to draft ordinances. He could be drafting ordinances all day long for things that don't happen. So that would on one side. So that's the issue of the drafting. On the other one, ballot language, that's a way to do it. But a lot of times the ballot language doesn't include a lot of the details. So I don't know.
I'm gonna stick up past you so you can see what we're talking about.
So the current charter section says that a committee can ask the city attorney to assist in the drafting of a proposed ordinance. And then I'll quote, and such city attorney, quote, such city attorney shall draft the proposed ordinance in proper form.
When is this? What is the timing of it?
That's what I was,
After you
I'll
see
need
the
to look.
it shouldn't be 30 days.
It should be after the city. That's like. Somewhere for.
It is actually the thing, it's a certificate of advisors.
The problem that has been historically, when it's those that get the petitions, and then stringing with the belief that it's legally sufficient, and then the attorney said, oh, no, it's not, based on this case law versus that case law. And that's where the waste of time. That's why if we move that, we move up into a process of a form.
I think the committee should submit a draft of the ordinance that they're proposing. And the city attorney then just looks at it for legal sufficiency. And I agree with what you said, Paul. If it's not legally sufficient, we should fill out it specifically why it's not. The committee can go back and redraft it, but the city attorney doesn't, recirculate it to the city attorney and keep that process going until something.
Is there consensus that that's a good process?
Yeah, we just don't know what the
Okay,
time
so
frame is.
there's that particular thing. Second, the issue off that bring up is how much time the city attorney should have to review the ordinance and get back to the petitioners. What do you say?
I'm waiting to see what it is.
You have something you want to join in? Yes.
Well, I mean, Leanne Barber. This is all really good, what's happening, because the purpose of this, really, to my mind, is to correct some of the problems in the past. I am not 100% familiar with what happened at Snyder Park, the petition. and unfortunately, had left. But I believe that they got the signatures, but then it was the same kind of issue about him saying it wasn't legal, even though he had drafted it. So that's a question, how do you change that, how do you fix that? But then secondly, it was supposed to go to the general meeting, but it went to the conference meeting, which Jackie mentioned, and then it just seems to have disappeared in a puff of smoke. So I don't know what's
Well,
happening.
what happened was that the attorney made the determination that it was not legally had legal standing to proceed with them.
So it's the
And
same
that's
as,
what we're saying, if we reverse the procedure,
but
to
he
have
had
the
drafted.
attorney sign off.
She's saying that the city attorney drafted the ordinance, they then found later.
I don't think he drafted the ordinance.
I think one
Well, yeah, so what it says is the committee shall have the right to request the city attorney to assist in the drafting of such proposed ordinance in proper form. And such city attorney shall draft the proposed ordinance in proper form within 30 days after being requested to do so by said committee in writing.
Is this after they collect signatures or before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, is that we're trying to move this up before.
Yeah.
Well, I believe
Otherwise,
so.
the signatures are going.
Well, this is the committee of 1,000 signatures. Committee of
That's
1,000.
after,
Okay,
that's after the
okay,
fact.
I think 30 days is plenty of time for the city attorney to get back.
I corrected almost every problem that we said you haven't, and I'm sure I'll think of those when we next meeting.
Let us know, right?
You've really done a really good job of hitting a lot of the details. And I don't know that Steiner Park was drafted by the city. I think it was drafted by an attorney. And therein lies our problem, because so is ours. And so, it's just getting, the city attorney can still say it doesn't meet anything, even if you've had it drafted by an attorney. So making them sign
The
off.
city attorney is.
Did a great job.
Okay, so.
I think that
Let's put in the
clarifies
process,
the-
they submitted, Chris is right, the petitioners committee submits a draft ordinance to the city attorney. The city attorney must review it within 30 days and find it sufficient or insufficient. If they find it insufficient, they need to explain in detail why it's insufficient and give the petitioners committee an opportunity to redraft the ordinance if that's possible. The petitioners committee may resubmit the ordinance to the city attorney once it's redrafted. And the city attorney gets back to them again within 30 days. That's it twice.
At least that way the public feels that they're being heard and that it's being.
Well, there shouldn't be an adversary relationship between the city attorneys. I mean, the city attorney is paid by the people. There shouldn't be any kind of adversary relationship, notwithstanding the politics between the city attorney's office and the people. Right? I mean, the city attorney is not a politician. Does what they're told to do.
That's the ideal, but.
I heard that. Okay, so we have one more issue on this.
Yes.
Which is, what should we have for the substance of the petition blank? One suggestion is that the petition blank have a summary, but the actual ordinance gets attached. Harris is suggesting that the ordinance doesn't need to be attached because it's bulky. And that a clear description of the ordinance gets attached. Yes.
As reviewed by the city attorney.
I was gonna say,
Right,
if you're just
it
gonna
might
use
say,
a description, then I think that the petition blank as well as the ordinance needs to be reviewed. So
Richard, one last question on the counting when they do the ballot. And Eileen Lieberman initiated this, that you have to put a dollar amount, so it's not part of the 75 words, but you put a dollar amount underneath it to let them know if there's a financial impact or no financial impact by the action
you're on the ballot.
on the ballot.
Where is that? We have to do that. What'd you say?
Counting
On the petition.
On the petition.
on the ballot, on the actual ballot,
Oh,
which we don't do.
It's not
here.
part of the 75 words.
No.
Then
It's
how do
just
we
in
get?
parentheses underneath. But I think it's something that the public should be aware of in the signing. If there's financial impact or no financial impact.
Is
Just
that
like
how
we
we
just
determine-
determined-
How would that be determined in advance when people are submitting an ordinance?
That might kill
The
the whole
petition
thing.
committee would have to come up with it.
Well, how? Think about it, how does
If
a
they're
how do
saying
the
this is an
citizens-
ordinance to build a new fire station, they do, but most of the things won't be like that. They'll be more amorphous.
That's what I'm saying. So,
And you
so how do you
notice-
then, without access to city auditor and everybody else getting involved in the
Or if
process?
they say something like, there's not gonna be no more tunnels within the city. How do you put a price on
You say plus 6 billion safe.
Just,
That was the facetious.
just to add, Harrison Gremlin, just to add one bit of
Yeah.
insight. Yeah, we have a fiscal impact statement on every,
Right.
every agenda item that comes before the county commission.
And
I-
they do at the city.
Yeah, and I have to mention that staff has a routine procedure that.
But but if it's an ordinance, as Chris points out, it may not be something like, I mean. An ordinance saying that there should be no discrimination based on X, I mean, how do you put a cost to that?
If staff in there was instance, indeterminate fiscal impact or no fiscal impact.
So you think when the petitioners submit it, that it should then go to staff for a fiscal impact, each petition?
Yeah.
Is what you're saying?
I would suggest the better part is if they get the 1,000 signatures, so 1,300, at that point, when it goes on the ballot, the electors of the city will see it at that point.
So that goes back, and I'm fine with that, but just to make sure that the commission understands that when it goes on the ballot, that we want some kind of financial.
What if
statement to it.
what if, so there's another spot in the process, which is the commission's got to consider within a certain amount of time. When the commission considers it, if the staff does a fiscal impact, then so the commission, before they consider it, has.
To just make it part of the
Well,
policy
to
of
the
the.
vote on it, you mean,
Yes.
consider it.
Yeah, to vote on it. Well, they may not vote on it.
Right.
And what is drafted says if they don't vote on it, it's considered to be no. No vote.
option.
So, but that would be at the right time, because then already you have the signatures, you're not burdening staff with a petition. So that would be, and that, so that would, that's right, that's a good idea. Yeah,
I agree with that.
so when it's presented to the commission, there's a fiscal impact, and then I'll see if when it's presented, if something's presented to the voters, that we can put something on a fiscal impact on the ballot.
On the ballot. right.
And that fiscal impact that the staff calculates for the commission goes on the ballot. Yeah.
That's better than it being able to be rejected because the petitioners don't know the number.
Last question.
No question.
Last question. Do we want the ordinance attached or not attached?
I'm for not attached, so long as there is a verified description.
I agree
Yeah,
with that.
approved by the city attorney.
What do you mean by verified?
That the city attorney
Attorney signed
agrees
off,
that the
yeah.
description reflects the ordinance that they have drafted.
Consensus? Yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Consensus.
good. All right.
Can I just ask you one last question? Is
Sure.
there a time limit on how many days you have to get the petition signed?
There is a draft. I thought we discussed it next time because we're just. spending
Okay,
so much
then
time on
I'll
this.
leave it till next.
There is one petitions, I think, what does it take? Paul? How long?
Normally what it would work, and again, that would go back, having the discussion with the SOE, if we're working within a time frame when we have to be submitted to them, and they know that there's a time frame that we're working within.
So would you have, the question is, do you want to have a petition being circulated for years and years and years, the same petition finally? Or should there be a
Yeah,
limit?
that's, yeah.
Should there be a limit from the time that it's
Originated.
certified as petition?
Can I ask you, how long did it take you on?
It took us just over 90 days. I think it took the same on the other, but I'm gonna suggest 120 days is probably 100, you know, like. Is a good cutoff date to get things if you haven't gotten those. Haven't gotten it by then, whatever. I don't know, or you don't even have to put a qualifier in there because probably at some point.
I think it's in here, Paul, isn't it?
But I would tell you 90 is too short.
Right now it says, but the draft says petitions must be filed with the city clerk within 90 days of the date of file.
I think that's too short. I think if you put 120 or whatever, you're good.
I'm happy to extend that to 6 months. I think that's a reasonable time frame.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we're moving on to, on the bottom of the page, it says qualification of members. 303 recommendation, right on the bottom of the page, 303.
Right here, it's right there.
Could you hold that up?
What page number?
Looks like that. I printed mine out off the
Oh,
PDF.
Done by the original.
Okay, so
I'm sorry I didn't have them printed out next time. I will, just there was so much document.
Oh, okay, we're on the next item.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna go to recommendations, clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, the way I set this up, it was, I originally put the current provision. Then the markup. And then as amended.
we're just gonna look at the market.
So really, yeah, you just need to. For now, anyway. So what I did on 3.03. And following the discussion on permanent residence is I added permanent residents of the state. During the 6 months before the election for both mayor and commissioners. Some of the changes that you're seeing were previous ones, so.
That we did consensus on.
Yeah, so based on the last meeting, the other thing I did was I added permanent resident of the city during the term of office for the mayor. And permanent resident of the district to which a commissioner is elected during the term of office.
So, Paul, I found this section a little confusing. And I think that you covered everything, but I think that we've covered it like too many times, and that leads to different sentences getting interpreted. So what I did was the candidate in the beginning, the candidate to be eligible to, candidate shall reside continuously in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
discussed.
I added the
I
word.
changed that to permanent.
No, just, if there's a difference
Oh.
in permanent versus continuous.
Well, I'm sorry, what I did was, because I tried not to change. Tried to leave as much of the original language as I could. And so I added the permanent resident further down. I crossed it out here and I added. it
I don't really
down.
care, I don't really care whether they're gonna amend it, we're gonna amend it, we should be clear and.
Just rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah,
I can do
so
that.
it's just, I feel like it's
I can do that.
too much, it's too many things. Do it very clear. I
I
wanna
can do
say that they have to be continual residents of the city, number one, for 6 months immediately preceding the date of election. They should be a permanent resident. They should actually, they should be a permanent resident of the city for 6 months prior to the election.
No, no, not really, because during last month's meeting, there was a discussion about bifurcating it, remember? Ben Sorensen's motion clarifying a different motion, it was to bifurcate so that the first the 6 months of qualifying didn't necessarily have to be permanent, this way, I understood anyway. The first 6 months for qualifying didn't necessarily have to be permanent residence. However, during office, it had to be permanent residence. I thought that was the bifurcation.
Yeah.
No, we talked about being a continuous resident.
Continuous and permanent resident, both, over 6 months
6 months
prior to the election. And the whole thing, resident of Florida, citizen of the United States, if they're, yeah. I mean,
Okay, then maybe I got it wrong, but I wrote down here bifurcated 6 months prior as a candidate, but then commissioners, permanent
So there's
residents.
a difference between, there's a difference between commissioner and mayor, because they're dealing with the district, so you have to live in the district for 6 months before, that was a little bit of a discussion. Let's deal with the mayor first. Okay, so I think they have to be a continuous permanent resident for the preceding 6 months. Is there anything else? What about the fact that they need to be an elector? So could you be a continuous resident and be an elector in Utah music?
No, you're right.
Yeah, we've had that.
Yeah.
So we need something that ties them to Broward County.
That's there, the elector of the city, and that was
Yeah,
done.
but what we're saying is you want to be an elector here within the city.
Yeah, it's elector of the city, so it's gotta be a continuously resided permanent resident and an elector of the city 6 months prior to the election. those three items. The
The
rest of it,
problem, when we started discussing it with district commissioners versus mayor.
I mean,
when
we're
the
just doing
discussion-
mayor for the
Because of
first.
redistricting,
Yeah, we're just
but
doing
it
mayor
does
for the
not
first.
affect the mayor's position.
So are we good with that?
Um,
Those three?
Harrison,
Actually, point of clarification. Are we talking about 6 months from the election or 6 months from the qualification?
6 months immediately preceding the date of the election. Is what?
I mean, that's. We're talking about something that's 6 months back, going however many months into the future. If your election is November of 24,
Right.
6 months prior to that, you only have to become an elector. Whatever November -6 is. From that point, I think there should be 6 months prior to qualification.
Okay.
That makes.
That's
sense.
fine too.
Yeah, that
I
makes
mean-
sense. Yeah.
because now that we have a set pattern, this was not set pattern.
Why do we do that?
Yeah.
6 months prior to qualification.
And qualifications,
Yeah,
again,
I
is set by the state anyhow.
Yeah.
It keeps it consistent with
And
state
then,
requirements.
and then continue to be a resident, permanent resident. Throughout, throughout their
Of
term.
course, now I'll give you the other side of the argument, state legislators. County commissioners. You just have to provide the residency upon date of your taking oath of office.
I'm aware.
Same thing even with constitutional officers.
I'm happy to be stricter than state law in this circumstance.
I also have a question on this section. The language that says shall not be an officer, employee, or serving any capacity with the city government. I thought that was overly restricted. I mean, if somebody's on a city board or something, they should not be able to be a candidate for election.
You can't be.
No, I mean, we're talking about it. If you're on a city board, you can't be an open candidate. You're-
Correct, correct. The minute
What
you file,
the
the minute
city
you.
ordinance says is if you are on board and you call and you open up a. Now, you don't even need to open up a campaign account. Once you declare that you are a candidate in some format. Then you have to reside from the city board.
Okay, well, that's the issue. Was that the way we want it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. I just, that it's.
And people need to understand, it's not from the date that you open up a campaign account. It can be prior to opening up a campaign account.
You gotta have a
As far
trigger,
as
so what do
it's,
you-
it's, again, under the law, it doesn't depend upon you opening up a campaign account. It's when you start soliciting.
Well, this, right now, this draft says the word qualify for election. Is that what you're thinking? Is that correct?
No, because qualifying is different than declaring as a candidate.
Okay, so
It's two different things.
let's talk about the word qualify.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify the timestamp. If somebody says on a board, I think I'm gonna run for office. Is that the timestamp?
The timestamp by law, and I'm talking about law, not by,
Well, I'm
Local
giving you an
people.
incident based
Once
on what you said.
once you start soliciting support, then it automatically kicks in on that date. by
When you
law.
say support, Judy, you're talking about money? Or am I saying,
Endorsement.
Paul, would you support me if I run?
Correct, by law.
But that's too arbitrary to me. That's not something
I'm
you can
just
really,
what Roy is.
Yeah.
That's exploratory.
yeah.
Right. I think the trigger needs to be filing.
Opening
paperwork to run.
opening a treasury account,
Qualifying, is that? the
because
correct-
you open an account to raise money before you ever qualify.
Qualifying and opening up campaign accounts are two different dates.
Correct.
Right, but the date that you file is, again, the date that you submit your paperwork.
Oh, that's true. You open up your treasury account, you have to file that same day. Yeah,
So what's the right time?
that's the trigger.
So filing, yeah. The date, upon the date of filing to run. for-
That is
Is that the
the
same
date
as
of filing your intent to qualify, because when you open that
Right.
up, that's nothing more than your intent to qualify.
Right.
So that's that is
I'm just-
there's a date statute
just-
that deals with
By
that.
state, yeah, by state law,
Okay, so,
once you
see if we
start
can maybe
soliciting
pull that
support in any format,
Peg it so it's
that makes
specific.
you qualified as a candidate.
Very-
But Harrison said
So it's
it right.
concrete.
A good timestamp.
So let's clean this up and just have it nice and clean and not worry about the existing. If they're gonna
That's the way
approve
it
a
is
charter
today.
amendment, then it should be nice and clean. If they're not, then we have a mess.
That really doesn't change anything, though. That's the way it is today.
Okay, So for city commissioner. Be eligible to hold the office of city commissioner. By the way, Paul, are we gonna keep saying the city of Fort Lauderdale, or are we gonna say the city? We should be consistent. Sometimes it's capitalized, sometimes it's not.
language.
I know, but let's clean it up. I think you told me that municipal code corporation does not capitalize. So let's say- So let's never say the city of Fort Lauderdale ever again, it's just wasted. It's just a small city. Okay. To be eligible to hold the office of city commissioner of the city. The candidate shall have resided. In the city of Fort Lauderdale. For 6 months immediately preceding the date of the election.
Okay, here's your problem with this.
Challenge.
This
We call it
city-
Challenge.
Well, this city failed to comply with the county's requirement for submitting for the redistricting. And because all the other cities submitted by December, our city didn't do it till May. They were the last and held up everything.
Okay.
So how can you say, if you don't know what the district is, even though it may only be every 10 years, I don't want to put something into a
But
charter.
the first sentence doesn't deal with that. It just deals with the fact that candidate shall have resided in the city of Fort Lauderdale for 6 months. That's okay, right?
That's fine.
Okay.
should
I added
we
the word
add
Prior to
continuous.
filing, is that what we are
And
still?
also permanent resident.
An elector.
Are we still at prior to filing?
But here's where it says it shall resign the commission district.
Preceding the date of the election, is what it says. You want to change it to?
Yeah, Harrison, I think said.
Yeah, I think
Before 6 months
qualifying.
prior to
Okay, so let's
qualifying.
make the.
But you can't, they did
Yeah.
redistricting in May and qualifying was June.
Well, but they're not talking about a district right here. They're talking about, you have to be within the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Correct.
Which,
I'm just looking at this page from Paul.
we're talking about.
We're talking,
Numerical,
like,
yeah.
there's different
Right.
steps to this. The first step is you have to reside within the city 6 months. Permanently resident of the city 6 months prior to qualifying. Then
But the next
But you also
line,
want to be an
now,
elected.
and shall reside in the commission district from which he or she seeks election on the day he qualifies as a candidate for that office.
Correct.
And Judy's saying there's a problem because you may qualify before the districts. How can you even qualify if there's no, you can't?
no, they did it 1 month before qualifying started. It was supposed to be done by December. The city held up the whole
When
county
you
map.
qualify though, don't you have to tell what districts you're qualifying for?
Yeah,
You did in June, except it doesn't, what I'm saying is. If redistricting takes place.
Right.
Once every 10 years, sometimes a little bit less, but basically once every 10 years. You can't have a requirement in here where it says about the. Qualification for the 6 months. You just want to leave it open. You can move into a district at the time of qualifying. I mean, because you don't know what the district is.
But here's the thing, playing devil's advocate, we're gonna try to now write something based upon one flaw that happened in the last 20 years. I mean, I like what Harrison said about the 6 month prior to qualifying. And not try to solve a problem of, oh,
But that's-
gee, in 10 years, what if they redistrict late?
But that's
I
the
mean,
whole point of doing this, Jackie, is
No, I know,
to
but it's 10
take
years from now.
mistakes to make sure that it's cured for the future, so we don't have to go through errors again.
Chris and Judy, what are you suggesting as a way to solve this problem?
Well, I think that when it comes down to district races, you take out the 6 months. You can leave 6 months in the city, but not 6 months.
So they don't
within the
have to reside,
district.
you're suggesting that they don't have to reside in the district
Correct,
6 months prior to qualifying. That's what you're suggesting.
right.
I just
But
agree
they have
with
to
that.
reside in the city,
Yeah.
be an elector in the continuous, yes.
So you just move into that district.
So you can qualify,
Well, it's the city's own fault, it's not the candidate's fault. City's failure to do the redistricting.
Yeah, but again.
That's the whole purpose, Jackie, is
I
to
understand
understand
how many times in the last 40 years has this happened So now we're trying to make a decision.
It's actually happened twice in the history of the
Elephants are
city.
flying from the
So
sky.
what's the problem with just requiring the person to be a permanent resident of the city of Fort Lauderdale 6 months before? Because it has
Right.
nothing to do with the district.
Yep, I could,
Right, what, Mary?
Well, just think about what you're saying. If I want to run and I want to be in, I'm gonna say District 1 because I'm familiar with it. But I live in a city, I'm a permanent, whatever it is, resident, but I've lived in District 4, way down at the bottom of the city. And I don't really know a lot about District 1. All I have to do is move there and live there for 6 months. I really don't know the district like somebody that's lived there in the qualifying period that you're talking about, if I'm understanding that correctly. So that would be what I would say.
However,
I think
But
it's a-
however, when
the
you
voters will figure it
declare
out.
at that point, you do have to be within the district.
When you declare, it could be right before the qualifying period of that, whatever that is, 6 months.
No, I understand your concern, but there's also that other concern too about shifting boundaries.
Right, and it may be less than every 10 years. It's out of the hands of the elector. It's
Yeah.
governed by government, not by.
You're talking about the redistricting being late this last time. Is that what you're, I really have a hard time hearing everybody, but
Yeah, that's the problem.
I mean, I'm very familiar with that because I was involved in that, but I'm just going to this other problem, which I can see happening a little bit more often than this.
We've
possibly.
had Senate races where 2 years later, they changed the boundaries.
I'm maybe missing something because I'm not so familiar with. Okay, so when you qualify, you do not have to tell what district you're qualifying for.
You do?
You do.
Yes. Yes, but what we're saying is if you go on the premise that you have to be a resident of the district 6 months prior to qualifying,
Yes.
you can't always do that.
Right, because the lines
Because
are still.
the government has changed the boundaries.
Because you could think
So
you're in the
you could
district.
be
and
living
then-
across
and then
the
they could
street,
change
all of
the
a sudden, the
boundary.
street, yeah. And it's not your fault. You had no input on it. It's government as a whole.
Okay, so what if? we
And maybe
said-
by a
What
court
if we
decision
said,
or
I'm
just the
sorry, I don't know
government
your
decision.
Mary,
Mary, what if we said that you have to live in the prior district or the new district, so that,
I
You
don't
don't
think
have
that
that.
would constitutionally stand up.
right? No, you have to live in the prior district at the time of qualifying or the new district, at the time of qualifying, but you still have to live in the district at the time you're elected.
Well, I believe that you have to live in the district at the time that you qualify and just.
But you're saying you can't do that because.
No. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying 6 months prior, you can't. You can at the time of qualifying.
I think we're actually more close in agreement here than.
Yeah, I think so.
That, again, we want to make sure that somebody has been a continuous permanent resident of the city of Fort Lauderdale 6 months prior to qualifying.
Right.
And on the day of qualifying, reside in the district that they're running.
So if they
It'd be that simple.
they adjust the districts 1 month before the election. So how can you qualify 1 month before the election?
No. Okay,
Qualifying.
let's step back.
Please, if you say it slow, I'll get it quickly,
I know.
but you have to say it
So-
very fast.
So before they could set the ballot.
Yeah.
And qualifying, which is in June. For certain things during April, congressional, whatever. The redistricting issues that come up, sometimes by the courts ordering it, sometimes just by redistricting consensus. You don't know. I mean, they even drastically changed at the supervisor's office, all precinct numbers, all kinds of data. And we could barely figure out that as of June. So to have someone have to be in a specific district versus just a resident 6 months prior is an undue burden. Not at the fault of the candidate, not the fault of the elected official, not at the fault of any of us around this table.
Judy, but do you agree though that when you qualify,
I agree with
you
that,
have to be in?
absolutely.
Okay.
I just think you guys are going down a double standard. That's my personal viewpoint on it. You're saying that the mayor has to live
We're just saying the mayor has to live 6 months prior.
prior to qualifying.
Yeah, we're saying
But
the
a
same
district
thing.
commissioner doesn't have to live there 6 months prior to qualifying.
We're all saying that,
Absolutely.
we're all saying that we have to be,
No,
No, you know, you're not. You're saying that a district commissioner can move into the district the day before qualifying or that day and say, I'm running for this office, where you're saying the mayor has to be a permanent resident and he has to live in the city 6 months prior to the qualification
but we said
trigger.
the same
So
thing.
I
for the
don't
district
agree with
commissioner.
the candidate has the
District
same,
commissioner, same
must
thing.
live in the city the same as the mayor.
Same
I
thing.
What they're
agree.
saying
We're
is that
not-
in
we're not
terms of
changing
living in the
anything.
district,
We're just talking about the district, the
But we're solving a
Unforeseen.
problem that happened once in 40 years.
twice actually, but
And also at the county commission level, the
It's actually
redistricting
both the
also.
office.
Really upset that it already.
so, but Harrison, earlier you were talking about the fact when they file their papers, their intent to run. That's different than qualifying, right?
Right,
Correct.
Yes.
so again,
two different.
yeah,
So what is the date that we're setting?
That's a good
for the-
point.
For the mayor?
I think the dates are all pegged to qualifying. The only thing that's pegged to filing is that's when you can no longer be an officer of the city.
Okay, all right, so when you're filing, that's when you can't be on the city board, so that was one thing, but the other ones are all there.
To qualify.
The actual qualifications is when you actually pay your fee to qualify to be the candidate.
Or submit
That
the
everything
petitions
is
to
just
make them
local,
more-
or.
So the situation, so what Jackie's concerned about is a situation where under the normal circumstances, the district boundaries would be set way ahead of the election. At the time they qualify, they live it. So what we're concerned about is the circumstance where the district boundaries are set very close to qualifying.
Right, which
and they
may
can just
happen
hop
again
into
in
the
8 years from now.
Hop into the district.
Yeah, so in 8 years from now, we're gonna go through redistricting.
Okay.
Or if there's.
And that's the whole purpose of
property,
doing this.
Yeah, there's other things that could trigger it.
Right, or court challenges we've seen in other parts of the state.
All right, well, we've done with some other stuff that have been somewhat controversial, we just sort of let it sit for a meeting.
Mhm.
I'm okay with that, sit this is, but you can see whether there's some solution or something, or we might be.
I think Jackie's question was, we have two standards.
Yes.
But
But you
if
don't.
the mayor, well, we don't. So I'm saying if the mayor is elected at large, well, then he's in the city, so there's nowhere for him to move in or move out.
Right.
It's not really two standard, it's really the same residency
standards.
standard. It's just a unique circumstance for the district commissioner. But if you feel strongly about it, I'm happy to vote on it, or I'm happy if you guys want to vote on it.
I think that when you
Excuse me.
look at the city versus the county, the constitutional officers, our state legislators, we're already being restrictive by saying that's at the time of qualifications. Because for them, it's at the time of taking their oath of office after the election. So we're already being restrictive. So it's a fair balance across the board. Again, the circumstances that are out of their control that forces it, and we know we're going to be seeing it in 8 years. And there are certain places around, where maybe even less because of court challenges.
For me, I defer to Jackie if she's not comfortable now, but whatever the group wants to do.
Why don't we let Jackie think about it and we can have Paul write it up and then we will talk about
Put
it.
it back in print.
I also have a 2-hour burnout time. I don't know how you guys are. I think that we should do this for 2 hours. So, Paul, next time you'll have the rewrites of the stuff and then we'll continue on. All right.
That's fine.
And before the next meeting, I'm going to connect you, Paul, and Nate, and I'm going to invite Joe Scott to participate.
For next meeting's agenda, any particular preference of order or?
No, we should do the ones, we
Keep going.
should go through the ones that we've, to finalize the ones that we've done, and then we'll go into new stuff.
Move on to 405, 309, 310, 310.
I want to ask a question
Yes,
before
what?
we adjourn. again, can we please move this meeting to East Fort Lauderdale to the
Why?
fire department? Because we're getting into season, it's more of a burden for people to be coming all the way out here at 5:30 at night. And we can basically have it at the fire department where it can be live streamed at the same time. And it's convenient for the majority, Chris and I, Harrison, and a lot more convenient.
But for the city with the recording,
No, they
Material
understood
that
it
they
was
have.
okay.
I'm sorry. I've spoken and I've heard already from the city clerk's office. And the reason why it's been selected here, as they've done other meetings here, is because of certain material and certain equipment that they have here in the ceilings for recording. And
Maybe
this
check
is
with
part
them
of the
again,
city.
because I've checked with them and they're fine.
I understand.
So can we investigate that, or am I gonna be blown off again?
I just could say that the council's having their meetings there from now on because they do have these same capabilities. And they can record them. I don't know about live streaming. We don't do that for ours.
Yeah, so just so I'm understanding this, because there is the Zoom component there. This is not being live streamed?
No,
Only,
Because we combined with Marine.
Marine advisory.
but
That's why.
but
But we are up on YouTube tomorrow. So everything that we do is back up on YouTube.
Can everybody comment on this? Do you guys want to go to a more convenient location? It's live streamed or not?
So be a chair.
Still not
Jackie,
getting.
I did a little bit of research, just looking into the fire station too. I've reached out to,
Mr. Booth?
yeah, to Chief Gola and Mr. Basic. The only challenge with that is on the same date and time, they have a meeting there. So
Correct.
and Fire Station 2. And Cassandra, if you want to follow up, is that?
That's correct. On the first Thursday of every month, they have a meeting at Fire Station 2. At another location, that's something different.
That's
but-
correct, but they do have an opening on Thursdays. That's what Chief Basic told me.
Our meetings are the first Thursday.
They
of
have
the
a
month.
first Thursday of the month. They
I guess
already
it
have a
requires
meeting.
changing the date, but at least we got a chance to discuss it. I don't want to inconvenience you.
Motion to adjourn?